Yes, the cyclists in County Wicklow. A lot of people don't like cyclists in County Wicklow as they go for their trip around the beautiful roads. And the main complaint seems to be that they ride 2 or 3 abreast there and just hold up the traffic for ages, especially at the weekend. Hi Declan, what does Michael think about cyclists who persist in cycling 2 or even 3 abreast on narrow country roads with no regard to car drivers who pay taxes to drive on the road, unlike cyclists? So what's there? Well, coming up in this hour, we're going to have some music from Conor Mark Kavanagh. Also, we're going to hear from the Caroline Foundation and a new rhino calf born in the zoo. Okay, so they got a new animal in the zoo. Yeah, life goes on. However, there's a conservation aspect to that, and rhinos are in danger around the world, so you'll hear about that a little bit later on. In the meantime, Jillian Godsil is here from Shalala.
Hello.
Maybe not in Shalala anymore, no?
Oh, actually, I am. I'm back again.
How are you? Oh, they didn't get rid of you.
No, not yet. I would like to say, though, some of my best friends are cyclists. But I agree. I would rather they cycled 1 abreast on country roads. It is very frustrating.
Just to give the story of the recent history, is Jillian got out of her bankruptcy, but she had a problem of somewhere to live, and she was couch surfing, and now she seems to be sorted out. But before we get into that, you'll be interested in this, and it's the Apple situation where we are being told in a way to take 13 billion from Apple because they underpaid us in tax. People can call that maybe a tax break for them in order to get some employment into the country, and it mightn't just be Apple, of course. We are in a situation where we don't want to take the money because we don't want to give jurisdiction to the people who make these decisions that they can interfere in our tax regime. So we're caught between we can't take the money because we give you recognition, but we wouldn't mind the money, and then it's the international notoriety for the way we handle our tax affairs.
Well, I think, first of all, before we get too excited about the money, is that it'll go into escrow and we won't see it in our lifetime. So that's kind of a moot point. It'd be very nice, I think, if you take that money and put it into the health service or into the homelessness, whatever. But it's not going to happen that way. I do think, though, there's a couple of things going on. Whereas foreign direct investment is wonderful, it brings a lot of big jobs, it brings us high profile, and yes, you need to attract them in. And since our country has pursued that policy, it's been very successful. It is fantastic. But I think if there's a 12% tax rate, they should be paying 12%. And I think that's the nub of the matter, because you hear different reports, and we'll find out more with the details here, like they're down to 0 point something tax. And I think that's wrong. And it's wrong for 2 reasons. One, that it does put us into that kind of funny, funny country business, as opposed to a serious country that offers, we pride ourselves on offering great employees, great conditions to work, great, minds that are here. It puts us into that slightly dodgy territory. And secondly, I think it does a huge disservice to all the SMEs, all the entrepreneurs and the risk takers who are employing 1 or 2 people at great personal risk and get none of those tax breaks. So that's where I think it falls down on. A, it sends a bad signal out to the rest of the world, and B, those tax breaks should actually also be extended to the indigenous business people in Ireland.
But they say there's no evidence of tax breaks with Apple.
Well, why are they fining them $1 billion? I don't know.
The European Commission are saying that, but in Ireland, we've got the political establishment saying we can't find any evidence of this tax break.
Without wishing to sound terribly cynical, I think the truth is out there someplace, and I wouldn't necessarily hold on to government or status quo saying, there's no tax breaks or illegal tax breaks, because why else would the European Union find them? I think let's look at the facts.
Because they're blooming political and they want to put their nose into everything. They think they own everywhere.
Well, I think then also, if you look at a lot of the opposition parties,
they won't let us build houses for the homeless.
Oh, I know, that is crazy. But I think there's opposition, though. The opposition in government would say that people have been talking a lot about the tax breaks on the other side of the house, and complaining that they're being way too generous. And again, while nobody wants to scare off FDI companies, and they are very important to our culture, and they provide employment, which is super, but let's just do it by the book. Let's just be, let's stop cheating.
Okay, well, we don't know if we're cheating or not.
Well, let's find out.
There was the double Irish thing, which has stopped.
Yes.
Okay, so you could say that was a cheat. Okay, well, that's gone. And there is no evidence of cheating. There's suspicion of.
Well, if they're making this ruling, do they not have facts on which to base this?
The European Competition Commission, they will look at things in a particular way. So maybe it's not Ireland they're getting at. Maybe it's somebody else they're getting at and using Ireland. But why would they have jurisdiction over us?
Well, I'd like to think that if we have a particular rule, we should be upholding it in the first place. So whether an outside body or not brings us to task, we should, because this has been raised a lot by Indigenous Irish people and politicians and business people saying it's unfair, the tax breaks that have been given to the foreign direct investment companies, which are also not being given to the SMEs and other entrepreneurs in the country. So it's not just outside the country, people have been pointing the finger. It's also inside the country. And let's have transparency. And if there's no rules being broken, well then, that's fine.
And what about this effective tax rate? We hear about these things like France, 30% or something like that, but they actually only pay 6% because it's an effective tax rate. So they're as bad.
Well, we live in a very strange world where finance has sort of turned common sense on its head. And you're right. They're increasingly, if you look at corporations, frequently the CEO at the top of a major corporation pays less tax than his secretary does in pro rata. Yeah. So our world is very skewed because increasingly the tax breaks are so complex, you need an army of accountants to figure them out and also to lobby for new tax breaks. So yes, you're right, you're pointing to an underlying fundamental problem with the world at the moment where tax breaks are only available to those who are very, very wealthy and they can change the rules and that's wrong. So again, it goes back to transparency. If we had a very simple tax code, you work and you pay according to it without all these other myriad of schemes and evasions and avoidances, some within the law, some hedging very closely, you wouldn't have this issue.
Yeah, but look at it from Apple point of view, and the Americans looking at Apple. California company starts making the iPods and iPhones and Apple Macs and all this sort of stuff. Now they make them in China. So basically, they don't really bother with the United States. They've moved off into China, except for where they hold their head office or whatever. They probably have their intellectual property elsewhere. They probably just moved it as a global world. They didn't make up the rules. They just used them.
Actually, not quite true. Apparently, Apple's capitalization is significant of a European country in terms of its actual access to capital, and real capital as opposed to borrowings, whatever. But they do actually make up the rules because companies that are as powerful as Apple, and I'm not having a pot at Apple or a shot pot at whatever, but they do make up the rules because they engage lobbyists and hordes of accountants to work with the rules. So yes, they are not only availing of better tax breaks, they're creating them at the same time. And it's this imbalance, and it goes back to transparency. When you have transparency, it's very hard to hide stuff.
Right, okay. Enough about Apple this morning. And I have an Android phone, and I'm sure Google are very clean. You must ask the British about that one. Of course they're very clean. I didn't say that they weren't, but they have their way, so I'm sure to get around all the rules themselves in a legitimate way. Now then, couch surfing you were doing. What was all that? Just moving from house to house?
Well, it was a bit. The last year has been particularly tough for me, and not as tough, may I say, as for many other people. What hit me was that previously, as you may be aware, I lost my house to the banks. Long story behind that, and I had to leave it, and I've been in rented accommodation for the last 10 years. And then my lease was up on the house where I have been living up until July, and I've known that for the year, so I've given plenty of notice. There was nothing untoward or anything like that. It was a very, just a simple thing that the lease was gone, and I was trying to find accommodation for myself and my children. And what I was highlighting, as the time went on, I could not find something that was going to suit us. And we do have animals too as well, so there's other criteria as well, whatever. But I couldn't find rented accommodation in Wicklow at a budget that I could afford. Now, I granted also I had a very modest budget, but it was incredibly scary as the deadline loomed not to find accommodation. And then, I was being advised, maybe take temporary accommodation, maybe rent a summer let, whatever. But I'm going, that only makes my job even worse because I've got another couple of months and I've got to try and when the summer finishes or whatever, or take it in September, and it's only short term. And what do I do then? And what every parent wants to do is to find a home for the family that you're secure. And I'd spoken a lot when I'd lost my house originally. I kind of went, do you know what? I can live without possessions. I can live without a house. I can do it the continental way. I can just rent. And then when that was taken from me, and again, there's nothing untoward. I hasten to add, it was purely, totally professional by my landlady. I have no complaint whatsoever with her. But for me, it was a dreadful thing because I could not find someplace to live. And that is really, really, really scary. And in the midst of all that, I wrote the piece that ran about couch surfing because I didn't know what I was going to do. And like you go every day and you're kind of like smiling and talking and getting dressed and you're not, in the loony bin or anything like that. You're doing stuff. But all the time you're screaming because you cannot figure where you're going to be living with your family. And may I say, I have to, today we've heard about the homelessness and it's been all the news and it's horrendous. I'm not lying in a street corner, shop front, clutching a bottle or otherwise, whatever, you know, I'm not doing that. I'm not in emergency accommodation, so I know I'm a step better than, and I say better as in more comfortable, I've got more supports in place, but it still is a really difficult place. It's kind of the hidden homelessness in Ireland, if you like, and middle class is a very old-fashioned word, but it's kind of that area where people who are used to having homes, who've lost them for whatever reason, and then they're stuck in this place and they're trying to find accommodation that suits, and it's just horrendous. But and I wrote that piece because I wanted to perhaps provide a face for people who are also facing into the same thing. But I have to say, what was really funny was that in July I was really, 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 really upset. I had nothing solved. I actually overhang my lease by a month, and I paid the rent. My landlady was very kind, again, no complaints there, but I was terrified. And then at the last minute I found accommodation for my children. That was great. And I was going to try and squash in there too as well. It's a beautiful one-bedroom cottage. And my daughter works in Wicklow, near Auckram. Beautiful little cottage. But there's only 3 rooms in total. So I thought, I'll buy a caravan. So we kind of squash in, whatever. And the kids, don't want to work, Mom. I kind of, I don't think so. So I said, I know, I'll move into a friend's house. Now again, so I had lots of support. I had a friend who had a spare room. I moved lock, stock and barrel into the spare room. But I was looking at being there for, I don't know, I couldn't find anything for another couple of months. And I was trying to set up my business again and trying to do stuff, and I had no broadband, and I was living out of hotels. And may I say a word of thanks to Lawless's Hotel in Auckram, who put up with me there every day going, will you reboot the internet, please? It appears to have gone down. They were very kind to me and just freaking me. But you know what's very funny? Sometimes, and I'm so blessed, I wrote that article, and the day that article ran, a brother of a friend of mine rang me up and he said, I'm looking for someone to rent my little cottage. And he had a beautiful little cottage just outside Shalala. I saw it the next day and I moved in at that weekend, and I'm still painting. So it was the shortest couch surfing episode ever. So I'm extremely blessed and happy and lucky. But I'm glad I wrote that though, because I had a huge response from people who were in similar situations. And I think that's the important thing. It's not...
It's hidden.
It's hidden. It is hidden. And I'm not saying it's better or worse. No one, everybody lives their own life. Everybody has their own problems, and everybody has their own difficulties and challenges. But I just think it's not spoken of. I mean, and don't be wrong, somebody who's in emergency accommodation or somebody who's actually on the street, that's far more difficult and far more painful and far more, has to be addressed immediately. Of course it does. That's a priority, and I have absolutely no problem, understanding that as a priority. But there's also a whole rake of people who cannot find accommodation. They just can't find it. And they have some money to rent, but they can't find it. And that is very, very scary, and that is very, very worrying.
Yeah, the supply.
Exactly. It goes across the board. It's not just, and again, I say, my heart goes out to a family living in a hotel room. Horrendous. So I'm not at all putting myself in that situation. I'm just highlighting another area of difficulty for Irish people at the moment.
And Jillian, just to finish up our chat, thanks for all your thoughts on Apple and all that sort of stuff, and thank you for dropping in. How naked ambition is not such a good thing to have when you're answering the door. Is there somebody particular in mind?
Well, I wrote that, and it was a bit like the Emperor's Clothes. It was less about what I didn't write than what I did write. I wrote a slightly tongue-in-cheek piece about Mr. Hickey when he was arrested, now accompanied by the camera crew. Apparently that's quite commonplace in Brazil to do that, but he was naked when he answered the door, which puzzled me. But I wrote the piece in more I was very puzzled by that, and I kind of did a little ditty about, he perhaps should not have answered the door naked, to the police, whatever. But it was more to highlight the fact that I am, as with everybody else, I think, is so horrified at the circumstances. There's alleged wrongdoing, which I can't comment on that. Obviously, we don't know for sure. But even like the per diems, 900 a day per diem, and they have their flight and accommodation paid for. That seems excessive when you have the young people working so hard all year and living with their granny. The Donovan brothers, what heartwarming stories. They are amazing. Or Thomas Barr and his mum says his secret weapon is a blah with Nutella on it, Or Annalise Murphy, who had to lose weight, and her whole family had to diet. And her brother was saying he'd wake up at 2:00 in the morning starving on her diet because they were supporting her. So all these young people doing these amazing things and so proud to get to the Olympics. And I just feel quite cross that it's tainted by something like this. And I think that we should...
Tainted by the Blazers rather than by any wrongdoing.
I think, exactly.
Just to make that clear, yeah.
Exactly. No, I'm not...
We don't know.
I'm not making any...
Nobody has been charged with anything yet.
But I just think that 900 euros per diem is a lot of money per diem. Most people, a young athlete could probably survive on a month on that, And I think that's wrong. We should relook at it. And I think at the bottom line, though, is people were saying someone in a position like that or authority, it should be rotated more frequently, and that in that case you get less. You know, there's more transparency.
Get fond of the trappings of things.
I think so. I think because most people like the O'Donovan brothers, who are just like the major heroes, and Thomas Barr and Annalise Murphy. They're amazing people. I give all that money to them. They're fantastic.
There's very few people who disagree. I think it was Catherine McKiernan actually said that she was travelling somewhere and the top knobs in the organisation were all up there in first class, and she, the athlete who'd been training out at 5 o'clock in the morning, was travelling down in steerage.
Yeah.
And
I think so there's something a little bit wrong about that. And again, also, I have no problem if you're a wealthy person in your own right, your own company, you can spend your money how you choose. But if you're also husbanding these young people and receipt of state money, I think it should be spent more carefully and with the people that are earning us the honours.
Yes. Okay. Thanks, Jillian. Glad you've got some place to go to, some place to call home.
I'm so happy.
In beautiful Shillelagh. Excellent. It sounds gorgeous. A cottage in Shillelagh. That sounds
it's beautiful.
Really nice.
Beautiful.
All right, Jillian Godsil, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.